All right, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Forward Thinking Founders, where we talk to founders about their companies, their visions for the future, and how the two collide. Today, we have an early bet segment talking to Ben Grosse. Welcome to the show, Ben. How's it going?
Hey Matt, how you doing? Thanks for having me. I mean, really appreciate all the work you're doing, highlighting sort of the next great founders, investors, and innovators. Excited to be on.
Yeah, excited to have you on as well, and I appreciate that. For people that are just listening to for the first time in regards to early bets, I 90% of the time I just interview founders have companies, they have a little traction, things like that. But every so often, I do these segments where I interview people just that are doing interesting things in tech that are involved with many things that I think are going to do some interesting stuff in the future. And I kind of label that as early bets. And I've done a few at this point. Some of them you may have heard of. And today we're doing Ben. So Ben, to dive in, let's just kind of start with what are you working on, and kind of let's give everyone a brief introduction of kind of like who you are and what you work on.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm doing a couple pretty cool things right now. The first of which is I'm investing at Hillside Ventures. So Hillside is an early stage fund, semi-affiliated with the University of Connecticut, or UConn, as you'll hear me call it. Early stage fund focused on insurtech, sustainability, and edtech. So we raised about $1.5 million and deploying checks anywhere between 25,000 and then 75,000, or somewhere is sort of in that range, and been an awesome experience so far. It's been really incredible to sort of move from the founder seat where I was a couple years ago and move into the investing side of things. And then along with that, I'm also the head of the Gen Z VC Club on Clubhouse, where I host weekly or bi-weekly panels with the next up and coming Gen Z investors, and occasionally a couple founders in there as well. So we've had, I believe, 6 episodes so far, focused on anything within VC, ranging from different verticals to different strategies to different size funds as well. So I've absolutely loved doing that. Been able to meet some awesome founders, some awesome investors, and some really good friends as well. And then the final thing I'm doing right now is I'm also working for IEQ Capital. IEQ is an investment firm out of the Bay Area with about 10 and a half, $11 million or $1 billion AUM. And I'm doing private investment research for them. So focusing on venture capital, private equity, growth equity, commercial real estate, distressed or private debt, really the entire anything throughout the entire stack of the private investment spectrum. And then along with that, I'm also a student at UConn, majoring in management with a focus in entrepreneurship, and then a minor in data analytics. And then I'm also on the track team here. So that about rounds me out.
All right, so you're doing a few things for sure. That's awesome how active you are in all of that. I kind of want to dive into this realm that I think a lot of us, on at least on Twitter, have seen the rise of, which is the second kind of point you said, which is you run something along the lines of the Gen Z VC club, on Clubhouse. Tell me what's going on with Gen Z VCs. There's meaning like I keep seeing like there's just a New York Times article about Gen Z VCs. There's an awesome Slack community. I'm connected with so many super talented young VCs, associates, principals, even some partners. And there's this wave of younger people becoming VCs, which to me makes a lot of sense based on innovation understanding. But like, can you kind of give me an idea of like, from your perspective being in it, what do you think is leading to the rise of Gen Z VCs, and what's your perspective on what's going on here?
Yeah, I think the first thing is over quarantine, and this is for myself, and I think I've seen it in a lot of others as well. Quarantine really gave people, for however sort of sucky it is, and it's obviously awful what happened with the pandemic. But I've seen a lot of people in Gen Z, whether they're interested in VC or not, really take the time to dig into things that they're really interested in. And one of those things being innovation. I think you mentioned it. Gen Z, or people in Gen Z, are really drawn to innovation because that's sort of the lens in which they grew up in. And I think they sort of realize that that VC is sort of the new IB, in a sense, in the fact that it's something that they're really drawn to. Yes, because of the attractiveness of the returns and potential, but I think it also does a really good job of marrying that side of things with also what they're really interested in. And so I think quarantine gave everybody a really good opportunity to jump into that. And one of those, you have sort of what I would say is the the relighting of Twitter, especially for people in Gen Z, where it's, it used to be just sort of a meme focused, social media site, has now really, blossomed into a much enhanced version of LinkedIn. Like I don't use LinkedIn anymore. Like I get all my connections, through Twitter, and then also Clubhouse, which I'll sort of transition to. I mean, Clubhouse is something that I got on in October. I know they had been around for a while, and initially didn't think too much of it. Didn't really know many people on there. But as I, continued to grow my following on Twitter, not that I have a huge following or whatever, and just get more active with people in the community, and actually focus on developing good relationships rather than developing a lot of relationships. I was able to develop a little bit of a following, and sort of took a thesis that I had that, okay, people want to hear what Gen Z VCs have to say. They don't necessarily want to hear what I have to say, but I know there's a lot of people who want to hear from Gen Z VCs in general. So with that, I sort of, talked to Megan Loyce, who's the founder of sort of the Gen Z VC Slack community. And we just sort of went on we just did an experiment just one time really quickly, just to sort of see what would happen. And the response has been awesome. It's been super fun to create and cultivate that community. But it's obviously a smaller part of something that's much bigger. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of these new, apps and platforms and startups that are coming out are connecting with VCs, both in the fact that, Gen Z VCs or Gen Z people are using them, but they're also really attracted to the style and the authenticity that these apps are able to, and these platforms are able to cultivate outside of the actual product. So I think there's a couple different things working, but you're seeing, I think in general, Gen Z really take an active role and really dig into the learning process too, which is also, a really important side of this. And through that, you're seeing a lot of growth, both in terms of Gen Z VC's impact on social media and Clubhouse, but then also their impact in the boardroom or in investing. So I think those are the two really big takeaways for me.
You mentioned that there's something about Twitter, which is ironic because earlier today I was giving a presentation for the school that I went to, ASU. I was doing like presentation for them, and I mentioned it. Oh yeah, like Twitter is the place to be if you're in tech, not LinkedIn. And a lot of them were just baffled. And I think most people are. Most people don't actually understand the magic that happens in Twitter. I'm curious for you if you're. Can you describe the asset that Twitter is to you maybe, and also just to anyone that like wants to break into tech, or describe even what's going on Twitter right now? Because it is magical and it's hard to describe. So I'm like interested to hear your perspective as someone kind of in Gen Z and kind of getting all the benefits from it.
Yeah, for sure. I think this goes for me, and I'm sure it goes for others as well. But for me, it's the difference in psychographics between sort of the psychological difference between using Twitter and using LinkedIn. A lot of my friends that I know, when they go on LinkedIn, they have the professional headshot. They have this, tailored, one or two paragraph bio about them that they'll literally take an entire class on writing, which I think is ridiculous and a complete waste of time and money. But then you look at their Twitter and they're actually themselves, and it's not necessarily professional, but it reflects better. And I think people prefer to be in that situation where they can reflect better, and or they can more be themselves. You don't, nobody goes on LinkedIn to laugh or to be themselves, or or really to find friends. It's to find connections and to better yourself, for your profession. And I think there is a place for that, and that definitely has some value. But I think the value that a good experience on Twitter can provide is far more valuable. I'm not, obviously, if you're just going on Twitter and doing random stuff and not actually doing anything, you're not going to get the value out of it. But if you're going on there, for the purpose of furthering yourself in your education and your investing and your professional life, you're able to take sort of that drive and that goal, but then also marry it with the fact that you want to be yourself on that platform, and there is room for you to sort of joke around and have fun, and act in not necessarily an unprofessional manner, but a manner where it's not correct grammar and all this stuff that really is associated with LinkedIn. um, so that's really, I think, the main driver of sort of that difference. But I think it also, you're able to show your true colors, on Twitter, which means that people get to understand you better. So, I've connected with people on Twitter who I don't think I would have connected with, on LinkedIn, because they saw some of my tweets, they saw some of the work I was doing that I was posting on Twitter, and they're like, "Hey, this is really cool." I love the fact that you're 22, you're in college, and you're doing all this stuff, but then it's also in a laid back but professional style. So I think it just allows for a little bit more flexibility, and that allows Gen Zs to showcase who they are, in terms of their personality, but then also their skill set in a little bit more dynamic of a way compared to a LinkedIn or a Facebook.
I think that's very well said. So I kind of want to ask a fairly open-ended question. You're involved in venture in many different ways, and it seems almost like three different ways. So I'm just kind of curious of all the stuff that's happening in the world right now, in the market, and the technologies that are being built. What is anything that's interesting to you right now? What's something that a trend that's intriguing, a startup that's caught your eye? Just anything that has your attention. I'm kind of curious to hear what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I'll take this from a perspective sort of Hillside, but then also personal. So at Hillside, I mentioned before, we invest in sort of those three segments, and that's fairly thought out. Just given that we are associated with the university, and we want to obviously reflect well on the university, but it's also a function of what we are interested in. And I think at the beginning of quarantine and throughout the rest of the end of that spring semester last year, myself and many others, across, across Yukon, across the United States, and across the world, realized how broken the education system was, not for ourselves, but also for, the levels under us, high school, middle school, elementary school, and then also the post-secondary, education system as well. And I think we realized that there is a lot of work to do, but we also hold a lot of those insights. So I've really been focused on the education space. Understanding is part of it, and going in and understanding and talking to kids, who I may not have talked to before, whether they go to UConn or other universities, or whether they're even in the United States, and understanding, where do they see the education system lacking? What are the holes in there? And through there, I found that there's a huge disconnect between the type of content that students actually want to consume, and the type of content that is out there, that's really readily out there. And the thing my other point, sort of going off that, is the fact that there's a lot of people out there who want to create the type of content that we want to consume. And when I say we, I both mean people in Gen Z, people older who are looking at some type of reskilling slash reschooling, product, and those younger as well, in sort of the elementary through high school school system. And so there's those three components. The fact that we want to consume a different type of content. That content isn't available, but there's people that want to create that content out there. And I think what we've seen from that is the rise of a couple different platforms, like a masterclass, Teachable, Campus Wire is another cool one, that are allowing people to consume content in a variety of different ways, whether it be through a formal education, like a university or a college or a high school, or just sort of through a on your own time type video, like a master class, or even like a mix of the two, like a Teachable, where you have, it's it is those teachers and professors, teaching that type of content, but in a little bit more of a laid back and not as formalized manner. So that's really the area that I'm looking at. I think there's a ton of innovation going on. And I think you have a ton of product market fit, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves as a lot of schools move back to in person. I still think you're going to see that need there. And it's just going to be really incredible to see the amazing founders that come up with these awesome solutions that are going to drive the future in the US and abroad as well.
I'm curious, have you done any research in your kind of diving into education? Have you done anything in the sector of micro schools at all?
So I haven't actually diligenced any companies, but I've definitely looked at a couple. They're really interesting. It's the scalability is the one thing about them that worries me, I think. But it's really interesting. I think that personalization, customization, and optimization are really the three buzzwords I think that I'm really interested in when it comes to ed tech and education in general. And I think that micro schools really hit on all three of those. And that's and the reason and for that reason, the fact that they do provide so much value is the fact that I am bullish on the space, even though I do have concerns, about some of the operational and then also regulation, sort of red tape, stuff that is basically bureaucracy that is associated with the education system.
Yeah, I about a where are we in? Yeah, so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I started working at Prenda, which is a company in the micro school space, and I worked there for 10 months. And yeah, blew my mind, like the type of stuff that was happening. Like I checked out, dozens of micro schools, not dozens, maybe a dozen of micro schools, and it's just it's special. Like education, education is a fun sector, for sure. One other question that I had for you, it's more kind of an advice style question. Like I think a lot of people, of all ages, your age, my age, older, younger, kind of want to break into tech. They want to get into VC. They want to start a startup. They want to just like get into the network. But there isn't like a super, oh, just do this, and like you're in, like Mazel Tov. What would you say for someone just wanting to break into tech, whether it be VC startups? What are some tips what are the things that you've done that you would kind of impart on potentially some others?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. That's a question I asked myself, a couple years ago as well. I think it's a question that everybody asks themselves, and I think it's good the fact that there's not a lot of structure there. I think it shows that there's a lot of different ways to do it. So for those listening, by no means take my advice. I mean, obviously, it worked for me, and I hopefully it works for others. But there are a lot of ways to do it. So there's not one golden way. But sort of in terms of advice, what I would say is the biggest thing is find something you love. Like everybody's so drawn into tech and VC and innovation, and they're not always drawn into exactly what excites them. The fact that they're in that space excites them, but they're not actually excited about what they're doing. So the first thing is find a niche that you love. It's similar to a go-to-market strategy for a startup. Find a niche, kill that niche, and then expand. Like it's the exact same thing for understanding where you fit in the tech and investment and VC ecosystem. So that is probably the main thing I would say. And then along with that, I think the other really important thing, is to put yourself out there. Write, read, listen. Talk to people. Cold emailing is can be tough and can be daunting, especially for university and college students. But it's something important you have to do. But you also want to be able to provide value, and putting yourself out there through writing Medium articles or Substack or doing your own podcast. It shows that you're out there and shows people that you're really interested in the space. But then it also gives you sort of that boots on the ground experience. Where you're talking to people in the space, you're learning from them. You're able to make your own investment thesis. There are so many great investors and founders out there that write awesome stuff. Like there are so many great Substacks and Spotify and podcasts and all this. And I see a lot of kids, what they do is they listen to one and they silo themselves to that one. And they adopt all of their views and their theologies and their mental models and all of this. And that's good to a point, but you're basically just a copycat of them. I think it's important that people develop their own investment thesis, their own mental models, their own due diligence practices. All of this stuff is, that's something that you want to work on. You don't want to be the next Andreessen. You want to be, the next yourself. You want to, further yourself. And I think, people don't necessarily trust that they can get there. It's something that I definitely went through. Like there is a point, and I still experience times where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can make it. And that's natural. That's good. It keeps you on your toes. So also be wary of that and understand that it's not going to be an easy ride. You will experience failure a lot, a lot more than you experience success. But make sure that you're able to sort of look back at those mistakes and take the value out of it. Just because you failed doesn't mean you did something wrong. There may be variables out there that cause you, to fail. And if you do that exact same thing 5 more times, you may succeed. And on the flip side, if you succeed, that doesn't mean you did something right. There could have been other variables that helped you succeed. So it's important to look at everything, through a clear lens. Be patient, take your time, Don't get too worked up. And then I think obviously most importantly, going back to what I said, do something you love. If you're just getting into tech or VC because it's what your friends told you to do, or because it's the next hot space, you're not going to succeed. Or at least it'll be very hard for you to succeed. So find something you love, find that niche, and sort of and grow it out. Dominate that niche, and then expand from there. I mean, I'm still in the process of finding and dominating that niche. It's not a a couple week or a couple month process. It's something that takes time. And that's the other thing. People try and break in 2 or 3 months, and it just doesn't work. Like there's a timeline to it, and you have to respect that and acknowledge it, and reconcile that, and know that it's gonna take a little bit of time.
One thing I'll add on to everything you just said is so golden. I almost want to just like snippet that and just share it, everywhere, because I think that that's great. In regards to the fact that it takes time, I think like the way that if I could give my 20, really 22-year-old self advice, that's when I broke into tech. That's when I decided I was gonna kind of be in startups and stuff. It would be like it's gonna take longer than you think it will, so just enjoy the ride. Like it will always take longer than you think. And it's still that case for me, even where I'm at today. And there's still so much farther to go to break in. So it's just like enjoying the ride is, like you said, finding something that you love, is super, super key.
hmm and the one thing I'll add on one thing to that. When I look at a lot of kids who I've talked to, who are my age and trying to break into VC or tech, the main driver of them trying to break in, and networking and all this stuff, the main driver of it, the main reason that they're motivated is a timeline. And that's the totally wrong way to think about it. Your main goal and your main motivator should be something that is not necessarily that isn't time related. You don't want to say, okay, I'm giving myself 2 months or 3 months to get a job. I want to have a job in this amount of time. That's the total wrong way to think about it, because you're not placing an emphasis on the learning, and you're not placing an emphasis on the experience. If I wanted a job in 2 months, I could go get one. But what if in 3 months a better job comes along? You have to be patient. Find something you like. Don't put a clock on it. Obviously, or you can put a clock on it, but don't make it a super. Make it flexible, and don't make it your biggest motivator. Make learning and growing and experience your biggest motivator. Like that is clearly like the what people succeed, I mean, that's getting all that is what what causes people to succeed down the road. Not finding a job the quickest they can. So some people, and I know, and it's tough. I mean, have as a college student, you have a clock, in terms of getting an internship in a certain amount of time, and obviously people want to get a job coming out of college, and that's obviously something to think about. But it's hard to make that not the main motivator. But I challenge people to do it, because you will learn a lot more, and you will get definitely a better bang for your buck, and it'll be a far more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, very, very well said. If someone wants to hear more of what you're saying, they want to learn more about you, and find you on the internet, where can they find you? Or ultimately, if you just have anything to plug, social or project wise, feel free to plug it.
Yeah, for sure. So my Twitter is Ben_Grosse. It's BN_GROSSE. You can find me on there. Feel free to DM me, interact with me. I'm on Clubhouse. I think it's just Ben Grosse. Also, operate, as I mentioned before, the Gen Z VC Clubhouse. So make sure you give that a follow. Tune into our conversations. It's just about every other Sunday. I think from now on it will be right around anywhere right around 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to tune into those. If you have any questions about Gen Z VC in general, feel free to reach out to me. I can get you connected in the Slack group. If you're not, and otherwise than that, I don't think so, because I think we're all good.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for coming on to this episode of Early Bets. You crushed it. Lots of awesome learnings, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, of course, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on. Really enjoy this conversation.